Well, hello, I'm Doug Apple, back with another special interview for you today. We're on the phone line with Mike Sharman. And as I guess everybody in the country knows, we have a new president in the United States. We have a new administration, and that often starts, these days anyway, with a flurry of executive orders. Mike Sharman, I don't know if every administration always starts this way, but it seems like it's common these days. And so President Trump has issued some things he said he was going to do, and now he is doing them. And so you're ready to talk about some of these things and their impact and their importance. So here's Mike Sharman of Share Healthcare. Mike, go ahead and talk about it.
Well, we are having rapid change in our government, but then it reflects rapid change all across the nation, and in businesses and in contractors with the government, and with the government, with schools, with colleges. The impact is being done through executive orders right now, but it will be felt in its application right there in whatever place you are. And, you can use the metaphor of this snowstorm and ice storms that we've been having through the South as examples of unexpected and rapid change. There in Tallahassee where you are, you go from being a nice southern, warm, moderate climate to being snowed in and iced in for days, which has just never happened in Tallahassee. New Orleans had 10 inches of snow. That never happens. So those the climate of our culture, let's say, is changing too. Here is the title of one of President Trump's Day One executive orders. Almost sets the tone and tells the story of how rapid the change is. The title of his executive order is Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. Whoa, what a whiplash that is from the Biden administration and then the Obama administration 8 years before that. Restoring biological truth to the federal government. And that has a huge, enormous impact. I mean, other than the impact of we're finally going to be telling people the emperor really is wearing no clothes. And yes,
exactly.
And we're literally in this executive order. It literally defines men and women so that it's not hard to tell. Here's the purpose statement. In each one of the executive orders, they need to give a purpose statement and then a policy and things like that. So in the purpose statement, it begins by saying, across the country, ideologues who deny the biological reality of sex have increasingly used legal and other socially coercive means to permit men to self-identify as women and gain access to intimate single-sex spaces and activities designed for women, from women's domestic abuse shelters to women's workplace showers. This is wrong. Efforts to eradicate the biological reality of sex fundamentally attack women by depriving them of their dignity, safety, and well-being. The erasure of sex and language and policy has a corrosive impact not just on women, but on the validity of the entire American system. Basing federal policy on truth is critical to scientific inquiry, public safety, morale, and trust in government itself. Whoa, what a wonderful fresh breeze of truth it is itself. The government's going to be telling us the truth. We're going to be actually saying men are men and women are women.
I know.
And he said, accordingly, this executive order says, accordingly, my administration will defend women's rights and protect freedom of conscience by using clear and accurate language and policies that recognize that women are biologically female and men are biologically male. And then the policy they give is, it says, it is the policy of the United States to recognize two sexes, male and female. These sexes are not changeable and are grounded in fundamental and incontrovertible reality. Wow. You had mentioned I'm the legal counsel for Share Healthcare. And one of the reasons people choose to join Share Healthcare, we're a nonprofit that shares the medically necessary medical expenses of the Christians who are members of Share Healthcare. And one of the reasons they join is because the healthcare exchanges and the insurance companies are mandating that the policies include transgender care and things like that are the gender destruction type of medical procedures. And Share Healthcare, of course, does not do that because we only share in those medical expenses that are not offensive to God. So this policy is so welcome that, we've been making a little chip in the cultural armor, let's say, that was the that bulwark of wokeism, that we were being compelled by everything, all the culture around us, to recognize these distortions of truth. And now, finally, the federal government is saying, no, we're going to say what is true. And then they give the definitions. Women are, it says, this is so common sense, but it's amazing that we need it as an executive order. But it is an executive order that's going to be having real ramifications across. It says, as a definition, woman or women and girls or girl shall mean adult and juvenile human females respectively. Men or man and boys or boy shall mean adult and juvenile human males respectively. We have to define it. And then they make sure we understand female means a person belonging at conception to the sex that produces the large reproductive cell. Male means a person belonging at conception, which that's interesting in itself, at conception, to the sex that produces a small reproductive cell. And then there might be some people out there who are thinking, well, this seems to be going a little too far. I mean, why is this really necessary? Isn't this just stating what is obvious? No, because the executive order goes on to say, each agency head, all the federal agencies, shall promptly rescind all guidance documents inconsistent with the requirements of this order. Such documents include, but are not limited to, and then it goes on and recites the documents that the Biden administration had put out. The White House Toolkit on Transgender Equality, the Department of Education's guidance documents, including pointers for implementation of creating inclusive and non-discriminatory school environments for LGBTQI+ students. The U.S. Department of Education supporting LGBTQI+ youth and families in school. And then it says it in Spanish. Then the other documents supporting intersex students, a resource for students, families, and educators, supporting transgender youth in school. Confronting anti-LGBTQI and harassment in schools. And it just goes on. There's lots more. That's why this is needed, is because the Biden administration was trying to force down the throat of everyone out there, particularly in elementary, middle school, and high schools. Definitely also colleges. So that's what one of these first executive orders did. And then just the other day was a new memo and executive order saying that anybody that's receiving federal funds, all contractors, etc., in throughout the federal government, and also specifically in schools and colleges, all those that are receiving federal money shall immediately stop their DEI proposals, and which includes these ones that are supporting the transgender movements, etc. And if they do not, they'll lose their federal funds. And for those that don't look at public schools budgets, normally the federal funds are the larger part of the budget. Not always, but normally.
Yeah, I read the one on defining a man and a woman, and it's so logical and it's so obvious. And you brought up the emperor has no clothes. I've been saying that for years, that this whole idea is a match of that old fable about the emperor having no clothes.
Yeah, I had spoken at our public school board, public comment period a number of times. And when I've talked on this issue, I pointed out that if we are intentionally teaching our students untruth and getting them to suspend reality in their speech and in their thinking on the most obvious and most basic of realities, are you a boy or are you a girl? If we're teaching them that, how are we going to get them to believe science? How are we going to get them to believe math? I mean, if you can suspend reality on anything you want just by saying it, then what else would they have any reason to believe in? So, yeah, it's incredibly important. Another, the literal first executive order that President Trump signed. And if people watched the inaugural, he mentioned he was going to do it. And then if you watched the time at the Capital One Arena where he was signing some of the orders in front of those 20-some thousand people that were there, the very first one he signed was the one that's titled Initial Rescissions of Harmful Executive Orders and Actions. So he mentioned that he was wiping out 78 of President Biden's prior executive orders as his first act. And a number of those things lets us know why. So one of the very first ones that was being wiped out was President Biden's executive order that he did on his day one, January 2021. And the title of President Biden's executive order that President Trump annihilated was Preventing and Combating Discrimination on the Basis of Gender Identity or Sexual Orientation, which was having the federal government say, no way, we're not going to allow you to say that formerly Colonel Sir would now be Colonel Ma'am. General Sir would now be General Ma'am. And the military could not discriminate on that basis when we need our officers and our military to be very clear-minded and clear-headed. So we don't want them having the total distortion of thought of thinking, even though I'm a male and have been the vast bulk of my life, I'm now becoming female. That is not the type of clear thinking we want in our military or any other area of our federal government. A couple of the others that he was wiping out that first, with a stroke of a pen, the rapidity of change in that first executive order that President Trump did, were these other executive orders of President Biden: establishment of the White House Gender Policy Council, as another one, guaranteeing an educational environment free from discrimination on the basis of sex, including sexual orientation or gender identity. That's the bathroom one, among other things. That would be is the President Biden was saying you can't discriminate anywhere in hospitals, schools, wherever, on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity, which wipes out about 10,000 years of human experience right there of what is necessary. So those are the incredibly important executive orders that will have massive change throughout. And then one of the last one was interesting. It was ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing. And it was very interesting that this was signed on Martin Luther King Day, which was also the inauguration day. Because remember, Martin Luther King's fight, which culminated or had its epitome, let's say, in his I Have a Dream speech, but all the way through his years of civil rights battle, what he was just looking for was color neutrality. And he specifically said that over and over, whether he used the term colorblind or just saying remove the walls. In his I Have a Dream speech, he mentioned that the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence was a check that had been written by our founders, and we just now want to have a chance to cash that check of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So removing the barriers that race preferences had previously existed was Martin Luther King's dream. And yet the Biden administration and the Obama administrations had put those barriers back up in an entirely different way. Statistically, you can look from the beginning of the Obama administration to the end of the Biden administration. Racism, race issues had increased when people were surveyed on it. It was vastly increased. We were right before President Obama was elected, we were at the best time in our nation in a lack of racial prejudice, looking at how people were being surveyed. The very minimal amount of people who would, when polled, would show that they had racial preferences. By the end of the Biden one, it was very large. And when studies were done on the efficaciousness of the DEI programs, it was shown that when a corporation or a federal government or a government entity had the DEI training, that diversity, equity, and inclusion training, it increased the racial tensions in that workplace or in that school. It didn't decrease it. It increased it because it put people into a victim-oppressor camp, which of course is going to increase antagonism. So that was one of that executive order that President Trump signed on the first day, on Martin Luther King Day, was to end all DEI programs in the United States government, and all of them, all the workers who were in that. Yesterday, as we were speaking, he had put all the people who in the federal government worked in DEI on leave, paid leave, and told the agency heads within 30 days there to work out how to fire them. So that we do have a truly merit-based, color-neutral government once again. I mean, that's what it's supposed to be about. That's what Martin Luther King's dream was about.
Well, that's the whole American way, is that if you work hard, then you can advance in your situation.
And they derived that as the American way from God. For we are all endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that is a Old Testament principle, but probably best said in the New Testament, where we're told that we are of one blood. One blood. And isn't it nice and refreshing that now we have a government that is saying, administration is saying, the government is once again going to be leading the way and removing these barriers to freedom. And, Doug, we've mentioned many times that Share Healthcare has 3 freedom foundations. We want medical freedom, we want financial freedom, and we want religious freedom. And that's what we're promoting for our members: medical freedom, financial freedom, and religious freedom. And so we exist, Share Healthcare exists, to try to be one little vehicle in the panoply of things that are out there in the culture to try to help have a foundation stone for God's people to stand on and say, this is how I'm going to be dealing with this aspect of my biblical worldview life, of sharing with Christians the medical needs that I have that are truly medical needs, not cultural cross-pollination needs where I'm going to be trying to change what God had done or undo what my own sins have done. We don't share in abortions. We don't share in abortive patients. We don't share in any of that gender destruction stuff. We don't share in problems related to alcohol abuse or tobacco abuse. And it's not because we are legalistic. It is because we know that God has put down certain guidelines for our good. And it would be unkind to accommodate or enable those bad behaviors that work to the harm of God's people. And by doing that, hopefully we're going to be an example to the rest of the nation, just as these executive orders are examples to local and state governments and corporations and just families.
Well, Mike, as we wrap up our time here together, we've spent a lot of time talking about current events in the new administration, and we've hinted at this idea of Share Healthcare. But for someone who's listening right now, what might be the advantage to them of considering, for them and themselves, their family, of considering Share Healthcare just in their own personal life? How might it improve their life?
Well, with those 3 freedoms, medical freedom, you get to go to any doctor that you choose to anywhere in the world. We need the bills in English. And that doctor gets to give you the type of care that he thinks is appropriate, whether or not there's a COVID hysteria going on or some other new fashionable plague at the time. We have financial freedom, that where right now the average of employer-provided healthcare insurance for a family of 4 is right at $2,600 per month. And Share Healthcare for that same thing, a family of 4, we're $349 per month. So for a single, we're $149 per month. For a couple, it's $249. For a family of 4, it's $349. And then for a larger family, it's $50 for each child after that. And then religious freedom. As I mentioned, you're sharing with other Christians. You're doing what God had asked you to do. Our life verse, so to speak, for the ministry is Hebrews 13:16. But do not forget to do good and to share. For with such sacrifices, God is well pleased. And, isn't that the goal of every Christian, to know that we are pleasing God in what we do and in all the aspects of our life? So when you sit down each month and you're writing your check or doing your online credit card payment or whatever, instead of sending it to an insurance company, which many people need to do, etc., you're able to send it to another person who is having a medical need of their own right now, and that other person is also within the larger body of Christ that you are in. That's the advantage. And there's lots of sub-advantages with each one of those, but that's it in a nutshell.
Well, if people would like more information about Share Healthcare, you can call 1-844-SHARE-HC, or you can find their website and do your own research at sharehealthcare.com. We've been talking with Mike Sharman. He's the legal counsel for Share Healthcare. And for Wave 94, I'm Doug Apple.